The first thing I'm ready to say is going to happen this season. The first thing that I believe in, the first thing that I'm officially locking in as of we're recording this on October 18th. You're listening to it on October 19th, 2023. The Purdue Boilermakers are going to the Final Four. I don't like it any more than you do. This is not something that brings me great pleasure to report to you, but sources have in fact confirmed that Purdue will be playing in the 2024 Final Four. And I say this as a guy who you might remember, longtime followers of mine might remember that I willed the Virginia Cavaliers. I personally did it. Tony Bennett gets a lot of credit. Kyle Guy gets a lot of credit. I have no idea why. When I was the one who said after Virginia lost to UMBC in the first round, the first ever number 1 seed to lose to a 16 seed, I said, God's plan. Virginia is going to come back the next year and win the national championship. That's exactly what's happened. I have coasted on the rest of my career. I've just coasted ever since 2019. Ever since they won the national championship, I've basically just rested on my laurels. I've not been correct on a big swing since then. I'm ready to be correct again, and I think I'm going to be correct on this. I said last show when the poll came out that I thought Purdue should be the number 1 team in the country. I do still think that Purdue is going to be I think they're going to be the best team to start the season. I don't think they're going to win the national championship. I think that in the end, their guard play is going to, just like it did last year, I think it's going to catch up to them. Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer are going to be much better this year, though. And I mean, those are the concerns you have with Purdue, or they're going to be the exact same concerns. They return all 5 starters. Miles Colvin, I love coming out of Indianapolis. I don't know like how great of a player he's going to be for them, but he's going to give them a dynamic that they did not have last year, which is just an athletic fucking freak that they could throw the ball up to. And, when teams are pressuring Lawyer and Smith and they get a little flustered, Miles Colvin's athleticism can help alleviate that a little bit. I think that's a break glass in case of emergency guy that they did not have last year that they will have this year. I think like Trey Kaufman-Renn is a guy who, if he gets a little bit better, he gives them a different dynamic. Again, he's not like a good enough guy that's going to like push them into another stratosphere in terms of the potential of this team. It just gives them a wrinkle that last year's team didn't have. So which brings me to the concerns with Purdue. I do think they're going to get to the Final Four. If they don't, the way this goes wrong for them is, one, Zach Edey's pick and roll defense gets exploited in the way that like Indiana did in West Lafayette, which I talked about on Tuesday, which it was just like a masterclass from Hood Schifino and exploiting Edey, who's a great defender, but he's got his limitations. And I think if every team goes into this season, Edey wasn't a freshman last year, but Edey wasn't the Zach Edey we all know now entering last season. So like as the season wore on, like people started to understand his tendencies a little more, started to figure out like what he was good at, what he was not good at. Coming into this season, everybody knows everything about Zach Edey. There's going to be no secrets, and unless he's spent the offseason developing a 3-point shot or some shit like that, which even if he has, I don't think Matt Painter's going to let him flex that. It would be cool if he did. Wouldn't that be sweet if Zach Edey just came out and was launching threes? He never posted up again. But yeah, so I think like the book is out on Edey, which doesn't necessarily mean it's not like a bad that he's still the best player in the country and he's still a great defender, but he does have some weaknesses. He's got some Achilles heels. One of them is pick and roll defense, and I think ball screen defense is going to be a problem for him all season. And it's easier said than done. You still need the personnel. You still need the patience. You still need you still need things to fall in line for you if you're a team that wants to exploit Purdue defensively. But Purdue's going to be a good defensive basketball team, and Edey's going to be great. And that's just the one thing that I think that like Matt Painter knows that going into the season. Like Matt Painter knows going into the season. Zach Edey knows going into the season that last year we weren't good enough in this area, and we know that teams are going to try to exploit this. So like let's address this. So I think it's going to there will be a game or two where it will be a problem, but I don't know. Like that's one of the weaknesses. I think the other part is relying solely on Zach Edey on offense, which last year I thought Purdue actually started really hot and not doing that. I thought like when they were in the PK, I guess it was 85. That was the one last year. Edey was awesome and dominant, but like part of what made them come out of nowhere and become the number 1 team in the country was how balanced they were and how dudes are hitting threes all over the place. And that came out of nowhere, but that was like kind of the story of Purdue for the first few months even. And then by the end there, they really were just like a one-dimensional basketball team, and everybody it felt like all the guards just stopped looking at the rim and they were looking at Edey and dumping it into him, and he was great, but like it was just very one-dimensional. And I think if Purdue addresses that, which I expect them to, they're going to be a hell of a basketball team. But again, the question is not like whether they can fix that. The question is whether they can sustain that. The question is whether you get into like a slugfest of a basketball game in the Big Ten, and Matt Painter, which I guess brings me to my third thing that I'm worried about with Purdue. Matt Painter becomes so consumed with trying to win the Big Ten that he doesn't see the bigger picture, which I do think this is a problem with Painter, is he cares too much about winning Big Ten championships. And if Purdue gets in a situation where they're like on the road against like a pesky Northwestern team, which I think Northwestern is going to be pretty good, but it's like an ugly basketball game, and Painter's like, you know what, fuck it, like Fletcher, your shot's not falling tonight. I don't want you shooting anymore. And Braden, I don't want you shooting. Like, everybody stop shooting the goddamn ball. Dump it into Zach. Let him dominate. And then they just have like 8 possessions in a row where they're dumping it into Zach Edey to make plays. And then they win the game, but then like that momentum just keeps carrying over. And then suddenly you look up in a couple weeks and like Purdue's entire offense is just dumping it into Edey, which is kind of how I felt. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but that's kind of how it felt last season. By the end of the season, it was like, damn, what happened to that team early in the season that was moving the ball all over the place and dudes are hitting threes left and right? And like that's what's crazy to me is like Fletcher Lawyer looks like Larry Bird, shoots like Larry Bird. By the end of the season, and Mason Gillis has the record. He literally set the Mackey Arena record for the most threes hit in a game. He hit 9 threes. I think it was against Penn State, right? Which is, looking back, preposterous that guy has the Mackey Arena. All the great players that have been through Purdue, all the great shooters, and nobody's hit more threes in a game than Mason Gillis. Shooting should not have been a problem, but by the time the tournament came around, it was like, man, do they have anybody that can hit a three to stretch the floor? So those are the concerns. I think Purdue will address them. Long story short, I am personally guaranteeing that Purdue will go to the Final Four. And if they don't, I'm pulling my donations on the Purdue Day of Giving. I'm saying that right now. If Purdue does not go to the Final Four, they will not be getting money from me this year. I'm not donating anymore. So pressure's on, Boilers. Make it happen, or good luck replacing the $35 I give you every year. So there's that. But I actually do think they're going to – I think the psychology of having lost to the 16 is going to play in their favor, where they're not going to be able to get rattled as much next tournament. I do think they're going to be one of the best teams all year. I don't expect them to win the Final Four or win the national championship. I think once they get to the Final Four, I do think their guard play – I do, as much as I like Lawyer and Smith, there is an obvious talent ceiling with those two guys that I think will come back to bite them. And I don't know, bite them, but like I don't think they'll eventually win the national championship. But I think they have what it takes to get to the Final Four. And it sounds absurd because Purdue has not been to a Final Four since 1980, and they just lost to a 16 seed. But that's how this sport works. Yep. Is just when you think you got a team figured out, they got a surprise for you. Purdue's going to the Final Four. You're welcome. Hang the banner in West Lafayette. Go celebrate. Just go celebrate right now. Like, stop practicing. Go celebrate. Because there's no way I'm wrong on that. All right, take number 2. Every single guest has tried to talk me out of this. I'm not budging. Mike Rutherford did his damnedest. I asked for him to push me over the edge, and I thought he did in the moment. I went home that night and I was like, no, I don't see it that way. And again, I hate this. I grew up being told to hate 2 programs, TJ, by my Indiana loving father, the Purdue Boilermakers and the Kentucky Wildcats. And yet I find myself going into this season saying Purdue's going to the Final Four. And take number 2. The pick is in. Dun, 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 dun. With the second take of the 2023-24 preseason, Mark Titus selects Kentucky basketball to be a very good basketball team. I think they're going to be good. I do think they're going to be good. And here's why. I haven't argued. It's not just vibes. So I drink the Calipari Kool-Aid every offseason. I don't really think I did it last year, though. I want to say I didn't do it last year because they had just lost to St. Peter's. And they just had like a gross basketball team, and Severe Wheeler was like, I don't know. I think going into last year, I was like, maybe Kentucky will be good, but I don't think I was really drinking the Kool-Aid that much going into last season. I'm drinking it hardcore this season. As a longtime viewer of the Global Jam, I always have an immense amount of respect for any team that wins. Can you say that with a straight face?
Any global champions.
Every global champion to me is freaking good. No, here's why. It's not just vibes. It's not just like me drinking the Kool-Aid. There's a real reason why I think Kentucky's going to be better than what are they, preseason number 16? I think they'll end up better than they'll be ranked higher than that for most of the year, and here's why. John Calipari will have multiple future NBA guards on this roster. DJ Wagner, Justin Edwards, Robert Dillingham will probably play in the league, I assume, based on what everyone says about it. I think Reed Sheppard has a shot. He's not going to be a one-and-done guy, but he'll eventually probably play in the league. Maybe not. Who knows? Who's to say? We'll see. But I think Reed Sheppard will get his shot in the league. Either way, he's going to have multiple NBA guards. I mean, Edwards and Wagner right there, boom, done, story over. Those two guys will play in the league, and they will play for the Kentucky Wildcats this year. Why is that important? Here's why. Last year was Cason Wallace. That was the guy. That was the guard. The one guard they had was Cason Wallace. You have, I'm talking about like NBA talent guard. He was good. He ended up being really, like, at the start of the season, they weren't really running shit through him. That by the end of the season they were, but it was kind of a mess of a team from a roster standpoint with like old dudes, and you got like the reigning national player of the year, but everyone's kind of, there's like the uncomfortable conversation that Kentucky fans are having when they, the Cats would lose a game and Big Blue Nation's throwing a few back, and they're all like in a bar talking to each other, and they're looking at each other, and one guy's scared to say it first, but he's like, fuck it, I'm going to say it. I think we might be better when Oscar's not on the floor. And the guy's like, yes, thank you, dude. I've been thinking that too. And it's really weird because they had Oscar Tshiebwe is the weirdest National Player of the Year winner of all time. And I think him not being on this team is going to be a blessing and not so much of a disguise. I think that the floor is going to open up for Kentucky, and I think having NBA talent guards for Calipari has always been the recipe. And when you think about the tenure of John Calipari at Kentucky, and you think about the ups and the downs and the narrative that I ascribe to, but I want to like flesh out a little more right here, is in 2015 they lose to Wisconsin. They blow the undefeated season. I think Kyle's hubris kind of got in the way. That's the official story I go with, is like if he would have actually coached that team instead of like trying to get everybody drafted, they had no business losing to anybody. They lose to Wisconsin. And after that, it feels like the trust that Big Blue Nation has in him just slowly starts to erode, and Kentucky has not been on the upper echelon elite of elite programs since then, and it's just slowly been a descent into hell ever since then. And now we're waking up in 2023 asking, can John Calipari even coach basketball? Does this man even know what the fuck he's doing anymore? And I have probably greased those tracks as much as anyone else and been like, yes, let's do it. Let's talk about Cal being on the hot seat. Let's go. But the reality is, I think like it's just pretty clear if you look at the last few years of rosters, he hasn't had NBA guards. And like when Cal has NBA guards, so look at like 2015, that entire team's basically in the league or played in the league at some point. They go 38-1, obviously losing the Final Four. So look at the post 2015 runs for Kentucky. The post-2015 teams for Kentucky, and what that overall, I guess almost a decade now, has looked like. 2016, you got Jamal Murray, Isaiah Briscoe, and Tyler Ulis all played in the league. I don't mean to say that all these guys are superstars. Jamal Murray certainly is, but they at some point in their life they cashed NBA checks, which is very, very difficult to do for basketball players. They were talented enough to do that. He had 3 guys who played in the NBA in his backcourt. He goes 27-9 and goes to the Sweet 16, which at the time, coming off a season where you almost went undefeated, it does feel like a little bit of a disappointment. But 27 wins in a Sweet 16 appearance is very, very good. It's very good. Every single program in this country would take that every single year. That's not a bad team at all. 2017, they had a national title caliber team. De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, again, Briscoe comes back. But it was Fox and Monk and Bam Adebayo, I know, but I'm talking about the guards with this little segment, so we're going to focus on them. 32-6. They go to the Elite Eight. They lose on the Luke May shot. They were very – Carolina goes on to win the national championship. They have the national champions They're a shot away from beating the team that goes on to win the national championship. That's not a bad team at all. That's absolutely a successful season. 2017 was, even though you don't get to Final Four. Like, I mean, let's not be insane about this. That's a successful season they had in 2017. In 18, it feels a little rockier. You got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Hamidou Diallo. Those are the NBA guards he has. 26-11, still a great year. 25-win season. They go to the Sweet 16 in 2018 as well. I mean, again, like if that's failure, sign me up for that. I mean, Ohio State hasn't been to the Sweet 16 in God knows how long at this point. It's been like 10 years plus. When's the last time Rutgers was Sweet 16? Like 60s?
It might be the 70s.
Yeah.
76 team.
So, like these are the seasons that, like, yes, Kentucky's not going to a Final Four, but like let's all just chill out and really observe what's going on here. Like, that's not a failure. That's not rock bottom. That's not even close to it. 2019, Tyler Hero, Keldon Johnson, Ashton Hagans, Emmanuel Quickley, all have played in the league. 30-win team. They go to the Elite Eight in 2019 as well. Lose to Auburn. Again, a 30-win team in the Elite Eight. Pretty good season. I know context is like, how did we lose to Auburn? Why didn't we do this? Why didn't we win the SEC? All that sort of thing. It's a pretty good season. 30 wins in Elite Eight. Pretty good fucking season. 2020, no tournament, obviously. You have Quickly. You have Tyrese Maxey. You have Ashton Hagans. They win the SEC by 3 games. They go 25-6 in a season which I didn't actually look this up, but I assume that they might have had some games canceled. No, they didn't. 2020 we were good, right? 2020 there were no games canceled. We had the tournament, the conference tournament, and then the NCAA tournament canceled. So who knows what run that team goes on? But that team they finished I think the final AP poll that year. They're ranked 8th in the country. So I'm not gonna tell you that they were going to the Final Four or anything else, but like that was a pretty good team. I think that you look at that and you're like, yeah, that 25 wins without a conference tournament, without an NCAA tournament, successful season. So then we get to the point where things start unraveling. 2021 was unequivocally rock bottom, terrible season, 9-16 on the year for Kentucky. They also, in retrospect, had a very, very bad roster. No NBA guards whatsoever. Davion Mintz is the leading scorer of the team. It was a COVID year also, so with like context, it's like what a just insane time for recruiting, for playing basketball in general. All of it stunk. I don't know if you're going to put an asterisk on like the Lakers and the Dodgers winning their championships in that time in the COVID years. I think you kind of have to. I don't think you can asterisk the Lakers, or you can't asterisk the teams you hate winning, but then also not asterisk the teams you hate sucking. You know what I mean? Like if like Kentucky sucked that year, I'm not saying they didn't, but like it's a weird fucking time, man. And the roster wasn't great. Which brings me to the point, which is that 2022, he gets Ty Washington, who's not a world beater. He's a decent basketball player. They finished a game back at the SEC. He was the only NBA guard he had on 22. 23 was Cason Wallace. He was the only NBA guard they had. The whole point being, the last 3 years are really the years that have built this idea that John Calipari's completely lost it and he can't coach basketball anymore and he's washed up and it's time for him to retire or for Kentucky to fire him. The last 3 years are the first 3 years he hasn't had multiple NBA guards. He's going to have multiple NBA guards. The team this year is going to spread the floor. They are going to let these guys cook. And yeah, maybe it'll be a situation where like Cal's rolling the balls out and not coaching as much, but I think that's exactly what this team needs. I think Kentucky needs that, and I think these guys are going to be really fucking talented. And I don't know what a good year looks like for them, but I think if you're someone who's like really crossing your fingers that that Kentucky is going to win like 19 games and be on the bubble this year, you are in for a rude awakening, because I think this is the exact kind of roster where John Calipari made his mark on college basketball. I don't think this group is going to be quite as talented, but in terms of like relativity, the talent of this Kentucky team versus the rest of the country, I think is going to be the same as some of his other guard heavy teams. So yeah, I think Kentucky to the Sweet 16 is a pretty safe bet. That's where I'm at, and I don't know how. I can't believe I said that. I don't know how it's out there though. It's out there. Everybody else seems to hate Kentucky. Everyone else seems to think that Cal's washed, that they're going to be too young, that these guards aren't going to be able to play well together. I think this is vintage Cal, man. I think this is a roster that, like, this feels like a vintage Cal team. And whether they win a national championship or not, I think they're going to very much be relevant all season. And I think if you're someone who's betting that the highest Kentucky will be in the AP poll is number 16 in the preseason, and once the season starts, it's going to just be a downhill climb. I think you're in for a rude awakening. Now they might. Who do they got in the Champions Classic? What's the matchup this year? They might start out slow. You know, it is a young team. It is a team with a bunch of new guys that are going to have to work through their roles and all that sort of stuff. I don't mean to say that they're a finished product out of the gate, but Kentucky is going to be relevant all season. And I think Cal having – I mean, Justin Edwards is a dude that could be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. He's going to be fucking nasty. So there's that.